And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at a game called Monstrous. Now this has the Greek gods on it. You can see the artwork of this game is really cool. And I heard a lot about this when it was on Kickstarter, and people would tell me how much fun it was, and I was very excited to get it. When I got it looked at, I was like, oh, it's a game where you throw cards on the table. Now that's not a new and unique thing. Flowerfall let you drop cards onto a table. There's a game from AEG, Maximum Overdrive, which lets you throw cards on the pile. So it's not anything new, but this one had a cool theme about it. Essentially in this game, as the gods of Olympus, you're a little annoyed because people are not following you, so you're going to just start smiting them with monsters, and they're like, please help us. And you're like, yes, yes, here. And that's your points of this game. I'll show you how it plays. Okay, now I'm not showing you the actual way a game is set up, but there are different locations, and you can pick which locations. Some of them the game considers to be more complex, like this one doesn't even have a special ability, so it's a simpler one. And you're going to place these around the table in kind of a pattern so that they're equidistant and they're not going to be this close together. Each player has a deck of monster cards. So you can see here we have a giant and a siren and a gorgon, a cyclops, a harpy, pegasus, dragon, hellhound, hydra, phoenix, manticore, and griffin. And so one player is going to take out a certain number of the cards. They're going to shuffle them, and they're going to take out a certain number of cards, and that depends on how many players are playing. They tell everybody what cards they've taken out, and everyone will take out the exact same cards. Everyone will then shuffle their deck. Now each person in front of them has basically a form here that tells you all the monster powers, and on the other side tells you all the location powers. And you're going to put this in front of you. The underworld is where you're going to put your dead monsters, which include the ones that you took out of your deck at the beginning, and then the rest will go in your monster deck. And players are going to be drawing cards, and on your turn, you're going to throw a monster from your hand. So you're basically throwing a monster so that it lands on the table like that. Now, you're not supposed to put your hand over the edge of the table. You're allowed to stand up and move. But essentially, you're trying to throw your monsters so they land on locations. Now, some monsters are red. These monsters have red powers, the Gorgon. So when you land, if you land on top of a monster with a red power, that monster's power goes off. So the Gorgon, for example, kills any monster that lands on it. And actually, I should mention that each of these monsters has two different sides. So the Gorgon on one side is not red, and on the other side is red. For example, the Phoenix, when it's hit, the Phoenix goes on top of its god's deck, so you get to throw it again. And then there's the Siren. When you land on top of a Siren, the god of that gets one faith, whoever owns the Siren. So you don't want to land on top of a red monster. But after you do that, you will then check your monster power. So let's say the Hydra did not land on top of a red god. Look here, put hit monsters on top of their god's decks. So if someone else had a monster that was out there and I landed on top of that monster, maybe the Gorgon here, boom, that monster would go back to that person's deck. On the other side of the Hydra, you can see, if I hit a monster, that I get a faith. And if I hit a location, I get a faith. So the more things that the Hydra hits, the more faith it gets. A Griffin does that too. On the other side, you gain one faith for each monster that's hitting this location. The Pegasus, same thing. You'll notice that a lot of them have the same side on one of them because that's their generic side. And here you can throw Pegasus again if you miss a location. When you throw a card, you can decide which side you're going to throw it. So I might want to throw the generic side, or I might want to throw the other one. Like here, a Harpy, if I hit another monster, I'll take two faith away from that hit monster's god. So you check your monster power. Then you'll check the location monster. So this says, when hit, put a monster that's hitting a location on top of the god's deck. So my Harpy hits here, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to take your giant and stick the giant on top of your deck. Although I might take one of my own and put it on top of my deck so I could throw it again. That's up to me. Then you're going to gain the faith from one location that your monster hits, which usually they won't be this close together, so you hit multiple. But if you hit this one, I'll be like, oh, okay, this one gives 3 faith, and I'll take that faith and add it to my pile. Then if for some reason you got an extra throw, which some monsters and or locations will give you, you get to go again, and then you draw a card from your monster deck, and then you pass your turn to the next god, and you keep going. So the game is going to continue on like that as players throw cards around the table, landing on top of the different things. And once all the gods have been thrown, then we're going to find out who wins. And that's pretty simple. You're just going to find out who has the most faith. Now, getting a lot of cards back is not super great, because when one person runs out of cards in their hand and deck, everyone else has one final turn. But at that point, each monster that you have left in your hand, monster deck or underworld, is going to be -1 against you. So you're going to lose points or lose faith. And then the guy with the most faith wins. And then there's some tiebreakers. You can also play variants where each person starts with 3 faith, and you can always pay a faith to rethrow a monster if you miss completely, and you're supposed to practice as you throw first, although it's really not that hard to have them land on the board even when throwing off the table. I'm standing a good distance away from the table, and you can see that most of my monsters are hitting there. Now, getting them to hit where you want them to hit, that's more of a problem. Anyway, that's the game. Now, a funny thing about this game is the fact that the artwork in this game is gorgeous. It looks really good. But I don't know if it matches the feel of the game. I mean, yes, it matches the feel of Olympus and the Greek gods and stuff, but this game is a silly game about throwing cards on the table, and the artwork here is very serious almost. It's like a game that should be filled with combat and such, and it's throwing cards on the table. Maybe that's just me. I just felt like the artwork almost was a disconnect, because the game is like, see what's going to happen next, that silliness of it. The card throwing itself, okay, some people are going to like that and some people are going to hate that. I tend to like throwing cards. And yet this game I wasn't as keen on, and I think that's partially because so much work went into throwing a card. You throw the card, then you're like, okay, step 1, is there any red cards? Okay, step 2, what is my power? Which side of the card actually landed? Step 3, look at the power of the land that it's on. Oh, I can't see it because it's covered up. Okay, well, hang on, let me look at the sheet. What power was that land again? Step 4, get this, and it just felt like too much work, and it wasn't fun enough. And then you have all these cool powers and everything, and none of that matters because you're missing a lot of times, or you're landing on the wrong stuff, or whatever you have landed on the wrong monster. And so the monsters are constantly, there's these interactions, you gotta check all the different cards. Each monster also has 2 sides, a generic and the better side. I don't know that makes the game better. Why not just give them all one side? Because with the generic side and the other side, you constantly have to remember which side it landed on. It sounds, as I'm listening to myself talk here, like, Vasel, you're nitpicking on this game. And I guess to some degree I am. Because when you're playing a game where you're throwing cards on a table, I don't want that game to be too complicated. But this game, the rulebook has detailed examples, and in this situation, in that situation, that situation. Can't I just throw cards at a table and see what happens? I almost feel like there was too much game for the level of what you're doing in this game. I think some people are going to enjoy it. I was kind of okay with it. I felt like there was clunkiness, checking everything, watching what there was stuff getting covered up, having to check these sheets. And the funnest part of the game, throwing the cards, kind of was paling besides everything else. And then the artwork, which is amazing, feels like it was wasted on this game. I'd much rather see it in a game like Cyclades or Kemet or something like that, because the artwork is that fantastic. This feels like little funny cartoony artwork might have been better for this. Personal preferences, of course, but that's what my reviews are. So I know some people are going to enjoy this one a lot. For me, though, there's other card flicking, throwing, dropping games that are lighter and simpler than this one, and I think in that genre, that's what I prefer. Dice Tower Judgment, it's okay, but other games do it better.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Zamknij drzwi!
Gdzie?